Anna Holligan there. Well, I'm joined now by Cathryn Costello from the Refugee Studies Centre, which is part of Oxford University. She's also a professor of international human rights and refugee law. Hello to you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. First of all, we heard in that report from Anna Holligan there that a lot of these people, because they're being moved on, now feel that their dream of getting to the UK is pretty much over. Is that the way you see their situation?
Well, I guess for people in Calais, we need to know a little bit more about who we're talking about. We know that there are certainly unaccompanied minors with family members in the UK who have a strong legal entitlement to enter the UK. Some of them won a legal case a few weeks ago, and lawyers have been trying to open up that legal route for them. For others, they may claim asylum in France, and they may be advised that that's in their interest. But the difficulty with that is that even if they're recognised as refugees in France, that doesn't entitle them to move to the UK, and often people's reasons for wanting to come to the UK is that that's where they have networks, that's where they speak the language very often. So it's wrong to imagine all asylum seekers and refugees are trying to get to the UK, but those who really find themselves in Calais trying to make an irregular journey often have very strong reasons, and those are often reasons that the law should recognise and does recognise if procedures were working properly. Sure,
if procedures were working properly. So what needs to happen then for those people with legitimate cause to want to get to the United Kingdom, as you've just pointed out, how can the situation change then?
Well, I think, those procedures, in some ways, they should be quite easy to put in place. Unfortunately, it took campaigning lawyers and strategic litigation to clarify that the unaccompanied minors that were in Calais had a right to enter the UK. But having clarified that legal point, I think the procedures just have to be put in place. I mean, the alternative just seems unconscionable to me, which is that you would say to the people who have a strong legal claim for family reunification in the UK, you have to make the irregular journey anyway. So I do think it's incumbent on both the British and the French authorities to put those procedures in place. They exist on paper, but obviously people's trust has to be gained before they can approach the French authorities, and they need a better understanding of the procedures that are there, but they also need to have confidence that the procedures will work for them.
But isn't it in another way better for the migrants if they are properly legally registered and housed for a short time perhaps in these shipping containers? They're properly documented, properly recorded, and then they can put forward whatever requests they have to move to the UK.
Well, I'm not that familiar with what's going on the ground, but I do know that very often people find that trust is low.
Sure.
My understanding is that the French asylum authorities do go to Calais periodically and try to convince people to claim asylum in France. But I think one of the problems with how we're managing the refugee crisis is that we have a system which insists that people claim asylum, including in countries that they don't particularly want to live, rather than setting up more equitable distribution systems. And so that creates all sorts of perverse incentives. So I think there obviously has to be work to be done, but we know that these populations include people from countries like Syria and Eritrea who have very strong protection claims, who would be recognized as refugees if they were able to claim asylum, and who have strong reasons for wanting to do so in particular countries. So I think a better way of managing the wider situation has to be a cooperative one, where different mechanisms are put in place to allocate responsibility across different countries.
And if that cooperation doesn't come, Cathryn, I mean, I remember reporting from the jungle back in 2006, 2007, although it's in the public consciousness now because of the current migration crisis. This place has existed for years, almost a decade. I mean, do you see us talking about this place in another 5, 10 years?
Well, I think one of the things that's changed is the composition of the people involved, because it's now clearly the case that we have many more people who would be recognised as refugees if they claimed asylum. So that's changed. But I think as long as the UK has a border in France which is unapproachable legally, there's going to be irregular migration and irregular migrants trying to make irregular journeys. And these phenomena are a product of our border controls and the fact that you can't make the first journey legally. So we don't have humanitarian visas to allow asylum seekers to travel, let's say, from Turkey to the UK or from Turkey to France to claim asylum. So we've illegalized refugees and thereby imagine that we're making it difficult to claim asylum, but it's obviously you know, just produced a whole lot of irregular migration and a bonanza for smugglers.
Sure. Okay, Cathryn, it's good to see you. Cathryn Costello from the Refugee Studies Centre. Many thanks for that.
Thank you, Clive. Bye.